everyone. It is Kevin. It's kind of late and it's kind of hot. I am talking about Hungry Brain. There you go. You can see it by Stephen Guyenet. This is part of my series on that book because I really like it and I found it very useful in my recovery. And it kind of goes against the grain, the conventional wisdom, because what is the big theory these days? The big theory is all about insulin and carbs, and you shouldn't eat carbs and you shouldn't eat sugar because that drives obesity, right? Well, Guyenet, he's an actual researcher and he's not just in it to make sales. He's a very good researcher and he's very competent. Anyway, I wanted to talk about one of the points that he makes here. He talks about macronutrients. And hi, Leanna. One of the things that he talks about is why macronutrients don't really matter. And so he cites a bunch of metabolic ward studies where they put men in a bunch of rooms, men and women, I guess, and they actually inject them with different macronutrients. So some people get like 80% carbs and some people get 40%, and some people get 20%. And they know exactly how many calories they're burning, exactly how many calories are actually going in. It's the most precise way of measuring expenditure and consumption. And what they found was when they varied the macronutrient profile of these people in the lab, remember, these people can't leave the lab. I don't know how they get approval for experiments like this, but they do. What they show is that it doesn't really matter in terms of fat deposition. And what that means is we should worry less about what our macros are and what our composition is, and more about how much we're actually eating. And what they've shown in these metabolic ward studies is that it's the total number of calories they're actually getting that drives obesity. And so this contradicts people like Gary Taubes and pretty much the whole paleo movement, Robert Lustig to a certain extent, and certainly Jason Fung, who I think is kind of a quack these days. But anyway, it contradicts that whole message that the more carbs we eat, the more insulin and the pancreas secretes, and then the more sugar and energy is driven into the tissues and the cells. Okay, because if that theory were true, then we would expect that the low carb diet to have less fat deposition than the high carb diet. And Gary Taubes, if you read Good Calories, Bad Calories, it's a great book. It's a great story. And I'll do another live video on that in the future. But if you read that, at the end, he's pretty emphatic about it. The more carbs we eat, the more insulin we secrete and the fatter we get. And somehow insulin is making us wider, kind of like growth hormone makes kids taller. He talks about that and why we grow fat, why we get fat. That's another book by Taubes. Interesting book. I'll review that later. Anyway, that was one of the big takeaways. And he mentioned that in the debate too, that these metabolic ward studies, and it hasn't just been one, it's been multiple of them over the years. And it's been in multiple locations. So it's validated, right? It's not just one experimenter doing this over and over. And that's how you know something is true in science, when you can replicate the study in multiple conditions and multiple over time in multiple locations with different types of subjects. And that's what they've shown. So here, the big takeaway from that is quit counting your macros. I don't count my macros anymore. I used to be really diligent about it. I used to use these fitness apps, and it would be like, it would tell me exactly how many carbs I was eating, how much protein I was eating, and I would try to calibrate it just right. And then the next day I would binge. So what was the point of counting all my macros and making sure I was meeting my macros? None. It was a total waste of my time. I wasn't focused on the big problem, which was binge eating, overeating, lack of control. I was stuffing myself with a ton of garbage every day. But on the side, I was really worried about my macros, which goes to show you that the hungry brain, there you go. Can you see that? It's too much glare. Sorry. The hungry brain is actually two brains. And so the part of me that was really concerned about the macros was this part right here, like that really thin layer of gray matter that you have. It's called the neocortex. That's the really smart part. And it makes judgments and analyzes stuff and thinks about the future and thinks about what you want to be and has all these visions for your life. That's the part of the brain that makes us human. That's the part of me that was thinking about macros and was whipping out calculators and was like, how much protein did I eat today? Like, you know what I mean? And then there was that reptile brain or the crocodile brain or that really primitive part of the brain that's kind of like back here, that's really old. and it was telling me to just eat, binge. So it was kind of like conflict of two brains. So the hungry brain, if he's talking about one brain, he's talking about that part of the brain back there, the brainstem, that part that makes us hungry, makes us sleepy, makes us do things that we don't want to do sometimes. That's what I'm talking about. And it's easy. I look back now and it seems so obvious why I would care about macros one day, and then the next day I would binge. Like, what happened to all those macros? Who cares? But I see this a lot in the fitness world, and people are so concerned about macros. Oh, I eat 30 or 40% this, or 50 or 60% carbs. Who cares? Eat for energy, eat for life, eat a diet that allows you to do what you need to do every day, right? I think the ideal diet has moderate amounts of animal protein, a good servings of starch, like quinoa, rice, potatoes, pasta, whatever, and then some vegetables and fruits for decoration and micronutrients. Not saying they're not important, but they can only provide so much. Anyway, that was a really good part of this. He makes that clear in the first chapter or so. Another thing he talks about is the cafeteria diet. Now, the cafeteria diet refers to a variety of really tasty food in one place. So if you ever walk into a cafeteria, airport, maybe a museum food courts are really good. Airport food courts are really good too. What was another one? The Google cafeteria. I've never been to Google, even though it's only like 30 minutes from here. Maybe I'll take a tour one day. I don't know. Not really interested, but I've heard about the Google 15 because when people go work for Google, they consume way too much because they have all this variety in one place, and they gain 15 pounds. Or you talk about the freshman 15, which I think is kind of a myth, but when kids go to school, young adults, go to college and they go to the food court and they're really stressed out, then they eat a lot more. But where was I going? Oh, cafeteria diet. When they feed rats a cafeteria diet, like Fruit Loops and sugary water and cookies, the rats get obese really fast. And what you can do is you can take that experiment and extrapolate it. We're not rats. We're better than that. Kind of, not really. But part of our brain is similar to a rat's brain in that we seek reward, we seek stimuli, we seek food all the time. And when we find something that's really rewarding, like cookies or cake, we are rewarded for eating more, right? So when you eat a piece of cake, it feels really good because you're getting all that fat and sugar in one piece of food. And then it releases endorphins, and then your brain remembers that. So when your brain remembers that, it says, oh, when I see something that looks like this, we should pursue it because it has a lot of reward and it makes us feel good in the moment. Now, that's a dangerous cycle that you want to avoid. But the whole point of the cafeteria diet is people are getting fatter because we have more crap surrounding us all the time. I made this clear in my last video. You can pick up your phone. Where's my phone? There we go. Right here. And I can order food right now. All I have to do is do this, and I have food. I can use Instacart, and I can have groceries delivered to my door. I can get DoorDash or Grubhub, and they can deliver fast food to my door. I don't have to move. I don't have to move my ass at all to go get something that's really tasty. That's my point. So the cafeteria diet is what we're living in right now. There's food everywhere. There's restaurants, there's grocery stores, there's vending machines, there's gas stations, there's apps. The grocery stores are now 24/7. I think this explains a lot more. This explains obesity a lot better than what people like Gary Taubes are talking about. It's not just insulin. It's the easy access to really tasty food that makes us fatter. That seems really obvious to me, but Guyenet seems to be the only guy who's talking about that. Reward value of food. That's the big takeaway of the hungry brain. It's the reward value of food that makes us fatter. It's not necessarily the carbs or the insulin. Okay, the AC just turned off. Let's see. So I wanted to talk about the rat study and the cafeteria diet. So they fed rats different types of different diets, and they changed the macronutrients. So some of the rats got a lot of what am I trying to say? Sucrose or sugar, right? Other ones got low amounts of carbs. The other one got, this is interesting, they got high amounts of fat and sugar. And the ones who got the most fat and sugar were the ones who got the largest. And the reason why is because when you take fat, so like butter or cream, milk, eggs, and you combine that with sugar, then you get a really, really rewarding combination that isn't really found in nature. It's hard to find a food that has a lot of fat and a lot of sugar, right? You don't find that naturally in nature. Maybe I'm forgetting something. I don't know. Coconut, I think that's mainly fat, right? But you think about the stuff that's really high in fat and sugar, like cookies, cakes, pies, pastries, bagels, kind of, donuts, trail mix, candy. It's all a combination of fat and sugar. And I just don't think our brains are prepared for that. That's why I don't think the answer is to avoid it completely. I think the better answer is to just be very aware. Remember, awareness, that's the big theme of this channel. Be aware that you're eating something that's really rewarding, and to know that it's easy to get carried away. It's easy to eat too much of it really fast. Like the example I had the other day, where is that? This one, the trail mix. I think trail mix is such a great example of it, because you have little peanut butter bits with M&Ms and salted peanuts with raisins. Okay, that's a good combination. I've eaten entire bags of this in like 20 minutes. I don't do that anymore, obviously. But my point is, when you take that fat and sugar, you combine it all into one, you get a really, really tasty and rewarding concoction of food. So anyway, I think I've been on for 11 minutes. Should I make another point here? I'll just talk about evolutionary mismatch real quick. So the whole theory about this is that humans evolved from smaller species, like less advanced species. So like the book actually starts with these little tiny organisms. I forget what he calls them. I forget the name of it, but they had a really simple brain, and then those brains evolved into more complex brains, right? The thing is, the way it works is you start with that reptile brain, that really simple brain, and then then what happened over millions of years, according to the theory, is that nature added multiple layers to this brain. So we have the really complex layer up here, that neocortex, which is only about that thick, right? A couple millimeters. And then we have the really primitive part of the brain at the bottom. And so that's why you feel this mental conflict in your head. Evolutionary mismatch says that our brains were designed for a world of scarcity. We were designed to work for food. Food was scarce. It was hard to find. We took a lot of energy to get it. And so when we found stuff like honey and really fatty meat, we gorged. We actually ate a lot of it. And that's what our brains are designed to do. That's why I'm amazed that not everybody's a binge eater. It's like, how is it that only a small fraction, I wouldn't say a small fraction, but the majority of people are not binge eaters. They're eating a little too much every day over time. That's why they're getting fatter. But I'm surprised not everybody is a binge eater. It's actually amazing how much restraint a lot of people show, because we should all be obese at this point. Anyway, but now we live in a world where food is very easy to obtain. It's very cheap. It's very accessible. You open a bag and eat it. I mean, how much work does it take to eat this? Nothing, right? It cost me $3 little, to buy this bag. I open it, I eat it, and it's like a really rewarding. I could easily eat this whole thing, right? M&Ms and peanuts, very good. But the point is, this wasn't the norm for most of history. The norm was starvation, famine, pests, right? We couldn't get enough calories. But in the last 100 years, everything has changed. But that's a topic for another video. Anyway, I think those are the points I'll make for tonight. Cafeteria diet, evolutionary mismatch, and macronutrients. That's why I called this video Why Macros Don't Matter. You shouldn't count your macros. If you're counting macros, don't do it. Okay. And the other big takeaway is, if you're eating a food that's really high in fat and sugar, just be careful, right? Analyze your hunger, enjoy each bite, right? You don't want to eat too much of it. Anyway, thanks for watching. I have tons of episodes coming up. So if this wasn't a good episode, the next one will be. I promise. But I like doing these. These are really useful, and it forces me to go back and read some of the books that I've read before. So I actually learn when I do these live. So see you next time. Thanks for watching. Bye.